they're really driving the narrative and inflicting, using the power they have to inflict a lot of harm and bullying tactics on people. And so, the reality is right now there's a lot of people that are looking around and seeing how crazy this is, and first and foremost, I think what's important about this is to understand you aren't alone. And welcome to The Narrative. This is Center for Christian Virtue President Aaron Baer, here for this final wrap-up episode on Woke Capitalism. Flying solo today, my co-host David Mahan is actually with a number of our good friends from all over the country in Washington, D.C. right now, with friends from Alliance Defending Freedom and just great people that are doing incredible work all over this country. So David's out there doing some good stuff for us, and I'm here to wrap up with you on what's been just a lot of fun of a season for us, a volume on woke capitalism, diving into an issue that we have been staring at for a long time at CCV, and wrestling through, processing through, because this is, as we were thinking about doing this volume, this is one of those issues that's everywhere. And I want to just kind of unpack three of the lessons before that I'm taking away from this volume, and thinking about where we as a church, as a body of believers, go from here. But before we do, just news of the day. There's obviously a million things going on right now. We just got the perfectly named Inflation Reduction Act passed, which is going to do anything but reduce inflation. But I want to just touch base on some news that CCV was in. There was a Fox News story earlier this week on our first school plant. Some of you have heard us talk about this before in some of our earlier volumes. But this is something we've been working on for a number of years at CCV, to build a model to start affordable 5-day-a-week in-person schools in existing church facilities. It's something that just even on paper was like, we got to find a way to be able to do this because we got to get kids out. And by the grace of God, and a lot of incredible work from the CCV team and a bunch of pastors and believers all over Columbus and really the nation, really. We commissioned our first school last week. They'll open next week. It'll be a K-2 school that'll grow. And I'll just say, sitting there at that commissioning ceremony with about half the kids in the school on stage praying over them, all I could think was, by the grace of God, we just snatched 45 kids out of the hand of the enemy. These kids were all destined to go to the Hilltop Public Schools, Columbus City Schools, that by every regard is an absolute failure. Kids graduating high school without the ability to read, the violence in these schools, the abject, the unbelievable poverty in these schools is most folks don't have a context for it, and these kids will not have to go through that because the body of Christ has stepped up. And Lord willing, we'll see more of this. And I was doing an interview with a reporter about this, and it's so insane. Every time we start talking about school choice and Christian schools, there are obviously a handful of horrific examples of things going badly in Christian schools. There's no such thing as a perfect solution, right? And in this one interview in particular, they brought up you remember the old the Bishop Sycamore situation, where there was it really wasn't a school story because this organization called Bishop Sycamore never incorporated as a school, but they said they were going to be a school, and they formed a football team, and they duped about 50 families into sending their kids here. And within about 2 or 3 years, it was clear that it got exposed what they were doing, because they somehow managed to get a game on ESPN, and it all blew up, and it was this big scandal. And she was asking me about the situation, and I rightfully pointed it out. I said, listen, that's not a school story. They were never a school. This was this was an old OSU coach that was exploiting kids. But let's say it was a school story. That was 40 kids, 50 kids, right? There's 50,000 kids. And mind you, Bishop Sycamore never got a dime of taxpayer money either. There's 50,000 kids in Columbus City schools alone, right? And so many of those kids, the vast majority of them are graduating ill-prepared. 74% of them were chronically absentee last school year, or 2 school years ago. And so many of these kids are graduating without the ability to read, without basic skills, and we've just accepted it. Mind you, every one of these kids, by the time they graduate, we've spent over $260,000 as taxpayers on their education, and we just accept the awful work being done through these schools. And that's, again, if you're hearing this and you're getting offended, but there's some good people in those schools. Okay, quite frankly, I'm not concerned about hurting their feelings anymore. These kids are being so absolutely failed that if you want me to be nice to not hurt an adult's feelings and ignore what's happening to a kid, there's something wrong with you. Like, we have to actually get focused on what matters. And this was just my frustration with this reporter, which was, she's like, oh, well, what happens if something goes wrong? Listen, something could go. And if we start hundreds of these schools, the odds are at some point something's going to go wrong in a kid's life. But it will be far better off for the vast majority of these kids if we get them out of the public schools, because these schools are so broken. I haven't even got into the moral failings, the CRT, the LGBT stuff being pushed in these schools. It is absolutely unacceptable that we have come to accept the failures in these schools, and it's about time we do something about it. So you could go check out those stories. Christian Post just wrote something about the school. Fox had something. The NPR station had something on it. It's been pretty amazing. The people that are involved in the school are fantastic. And I'll say, the goal of this is we want to, on every corner you see a church, we want to see a school. So if your church wants to do something like this, we want to know, we want to connect with you, and we want to make this dream a reality where you are. But let's get to woke capitalism. Let's get to this volume and the conversations we had. Thinking through, kicking it off with Vivek Ramaswamy and talking to my buddy Joel Baer at the Babylon Bee, Terry Schilling over at American Principles Project, about how woke capitalism has completely shifted the political dynamics. Dr. Van Mol about how woke capitalism has impacted medicine. I think as I was kind of thinking through what are the big 3 takeaways I'm going to have from this volume, it starts first and foremost with that this issue, that the issue of woke capitalism, and when I say woke capitalism, I mean Fortune 500 companies and chambers of commerce and corporate America broadly. Let's just say that corporate America broadly, putting woke ideology over their own self interests and capitalistic interests, right? So this is where companies are actually doing things that could be, and many times are, contrary to their own financial interests in order to drive a woke and religious agenda. That they hold. I say religious agenda. They hold this dogma with religious fervor. I'll say, as I was thinking about it, this season in particular almost matches up it matches up perfectly with the whole volume we did on Marxism, because when you really understand the way Marxism works, and you understand the foothold it has in our country right now, you see why corporate America has succumbed to this woke capitalistic mindset. And so as we're thinking through this volume and unpacking the narratives all around, there 3 key lessons really jumped out to me, or takeaways, I should say, jumped out to me. First and foremost, that this is everywhere. The way that woke capitalism is impacting culture, is impacting the world around us. There's really not a sector of society right now that's not being impacted by corporate America's hard shift left. It actually reminded me of one of my favorite quotes from theologian Abraham Kuyper, that he said, there's not a square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is Lord over all, does not exclaim mine. And I just love that. That's a philosophy at CCV that one of the reasons we changed our name to Center for Christian Virtue is say, listen, all of this, everything we do is for the glory of God. In the same way, Marxists have that same mindset, right? And corporate America is living out that mindset right now, and leveraging the economic power they have, and the power they have over their employees and their customers to drive a leftist agenda, a leftist political view of the world. And so that, thinking about the conversations we had with Dr. Van Mol, and understanding the unbelievable pressure doctors are under right now to advance this woke medicine. And this is more than just the reason why we included that interview in particular in this series is it's not just about the fact that wokeism is in the medical field. There is an economic side of this, where they're leveraging their financial powers, hospitals and pharmaceutical companies, and they're also making money off the backs of kids that they're sterilizing for life. And we see how they leverage this in medicine. They leverage this in the business side, the economic side of education. Implementing these ESG policies through HR departments and legal departments is massive. And then again, like for any of you out there that work in corporate America, I was just talking with an engineer last week, a friend of mine that's an engineer supporter of CCV, and he was telling me about they had a corporate man. This is a guy who's been working in this field for over probably 30, 40 years, has been really successful, both for himself but also for his company, obviously. And he was telling how a memo just went around instructing all of their employees to use the pronouns they, them for one of their coworkers, instructing their employees to lie. And this is something we're seeing everywhere. There's very few large companies today that aren't seeing this. And it's one of these things that we need to talk about that we encourage. We want to see more pastors and churches talking about this primarily because this is the real life stuff people are dealing with. How should we think about this? How should we respond to it? Should if your employer is forcing you to use preferred pronouns, should you do it? And I would say no. That's a baseline going back to our Marxism podcast and thinking about Rod Dreher's book, Live Not by Lies, that comes from a quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and the importance of, hey, listen, we might not be able to stop Procter & Gamble or Nationwide or any of these, you name the corporation from going completely woke and selling their souls, but we can just say we're not going along with it. So that's and then I'll say the conversation we had with Vivek, if you didn't catch that episode, you got to go back and listen to it. That the pervasiveness of this mindset through corporate America into our foreign policy, into the global scale is just unbelievable. That was such an eye-opening conversation. So that's the first one. It's everywhere. The second part of it, though, I hope is a little encouraging, which is if you're looking around at this and saying this is crazy, you're not alone, right? You're lots of people are looking at this and you're seeing, again, this is a part of the conversation I was just having the other day. We talked about this in the bonus episode we did last week about the New Yorker story. And the whole framing that Jane Mayer used in that story was how far right Ohio's gone. And the reality is it's how far left the Democratic Party has gone. And really this sort of elite academic portion of society that's driving this, right? They're really driving the narrative and inflicting, using the power they have to inflict a lot of harm and bullying tactics on people. And so, the reality is right now there's a lot of people that are looking around and seeing how crazy this is, and first and foremost, I think what's important about this is to understand you aren't alone. And if you speak up, this was the conversation I was having with this engineer friend of mine earlier this week, was, one, be willing to, count the cost, be willing to what's coming your way. But I guarantee you there's other people that saw that memo that are wishing somebody would speak up. And it, a lot of times it just takes one. Now, a lot of times I've seen it too, where everyone's patting each other on the back saying we're going to do something about this, and then the one speaks up and everybody runs for cover. That's equally a possibility. But the reality is right now, there are people that are, you might not even realize, that are looking at this in your company, in your church, in your school, in your hospital, whatever you are, that see it and recognize how crazy it is. And at least for now, I still believe we have the numbers of just baseline of more people saying this is wrong. We shouldn't be pursuing ESG policies and forsaking our shareholders in order to appease some stakeholders, right? And doing things that are contrary to our own economic benefit and serving our customers in order to advance a political agenda. So there is a real sense right now that we aren't alone. But the third lesson, the third takeaway I've got from this, though, is nothing's going to get better unless we do something about this. This is not going to go away unless we actively take it on. And hear me out, actively taking it on is not posting on social media. Like, don't get me wrong, talk about it, share this stuff, help educate people, but be willing to speak out. That was why we wanted to do that episode with Matt and Sam talking about the Christian Business Partnership. And one of the things we launched at CCV, and this is not an ad for the Christian Business Partnership. By all means, we'd love for you to join, love for you to get connected, all that kind of good stuff. But what I want to talk about that just for a second, because I think a lot of times with problems like this, and I would say the problems in the public schools is another example of it. Ostensibly what our strategy comes out to is just a hope and a prayer that it's going to work itself out, right? Because the problem either seems too big to do something about, or we don't know where to go, right? We don't know what to do. And my thing with this is that the fervor of the left is it's so deep, it's so ingrained in them. They're not going to stop. And it's only going to get harder the longer we wait to do something about it. That was, when we formed the Christian Business Partnership, when I first floated this idea to my board, they asked, why are we forming a chamber of commerce? And I said two things. First and foremost, where the chambers of commerce have gone, where corporate America has gone. Literally, as I'm recording this, I'm looking out our window and I see the massive nationwide insurance tower in downtown Columbus. Where these people have gone, it has made them one of our biggest political opponents out there right now. That I'm used to having to take on Planned Parenthood and the ACLU and all their nonsense, but now corporate America is opposing us on things like, hey, don't cut off the breasts of a 14-year-old, right? And so that aspect alone is worth doing it. But the other side of it is, we were looking around and saying, well, nobody else is going to do this, and nobody else is in a position to do this, and everyone kind of acknowledges this is needed, but nobody's doing anything about it. And this is, guys, I'm telling you, when we're looking at these problems and you dive deep into them and you understand how systematic they are, how wide they are, how sweeping they are, and you see. You understand that both now there's financial interests in them doing this. They're training up the next generation of workers and CEOs and executives that this is what it means to lead a company. This is what it means to do this work. They're changing culture through this, right? If we don't get active in fighting against it, whether that's joining something like Christian Business Partnership, or just in the business that you work at or the business that you own, saying, we're not going down this path. We're not going to have a DEI policy because that's nonsense, right? We're not going to be implementing an ESG policy. And if that means that you're going to protest us, I got to tell you, I know a handful of the folks that are getting attacked by the media because they don't go along with the human rights campaign's equality index, right? We had Jeremy Tedesco on from ADF talking about the HRC equality index and the religious freedom index that they've put together in response. But a lot of these folks, they're terrified of, if I don't have a good score on the HRC equality index, we're just gonna be lambasted in the press, and we're gonna be so hurt. And they were right; they were lambasted in the press. But guess what? It hasn't hurt their bottom line. Consumers actually don't care, and if you're just willing to endure some of that scrutiny, I know it doesn't feel good to be called a bigot in the press. But if you know in your heart of hearts, and if you care about first and foremost what the Lord thinks of you, you can endure that stuff. And that's the baseline on it is it's not going to get easier to endure. And the longer we wait to take it on, the harder it's going to get. So yeah, I'll say those are the three main things I'm taking away from this season. It's been so much fun going through this with you. I'll say we have been blessed by the feedback we're getting from folks. If you've enjoyed this volume, let us know. Reach out to us. That type of encouragement means a lot. Again, leave a review, give a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast from, on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else. Those things really help us reach more folks. We're going to do a poll, and this is going to be news to Grace Rose sitting behind me right now. We're going to do a poll on what we want to do next season. We'll send an email out. If you don't get our emails, just go to ccv.org and sign up there. But we're going to do a poll on what should our next season be on. I've got a few ideas I'm kicking around. I'm not going to say what those are because I don't want to taint the poll here, and we're big believers in polling here. But would love to get your thoughts on what we should cover next in the next season of The Narrative. Again, I want to thank our good friend Vince Tornero at Wessler Media for production of the pod. If you have any media needs, graphic design, multimedia, be sure to check out Wessler Media. Can't recommend them highly enough. Grateful to Grace and Claire and my co-host David for all they do to make this podcast go. Especially grateful to all our guests. Obviously, grateful to Jesus for giving us the opportunity to engage in these conversations, and looking forward to being back with you next time here on The Narrative.